All right, so I know this is a long time coming, but I wanted to go over Genesis chapter 4. So let's get started here. Now Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. And so it's interesting here that Eve attributes her ability to conceive to the Lord helping her. And that's a very interesting statement, especially as it relates to this debate on abortion. But I won't get into that here. And again, she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell. Now, some people will say that the reason God didn't have any regard for Cain's offering was because it was an offering from the ground. But we see that there's even grain offerings in the Mosaic covenant. So, and I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense here. I don't think it was a matter of Cain offering something from the ground and Abel offering an animal. I think it was the motivation behind the offering. I think it was Cain's heart. And we'll see in a minute why I believe that. But I don't think it had anything to do with the substance of the offering, but the substance of the person giving the offering. The Lord said to Cain, why are you angry, and why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. And so a lot was just said here. So God is saying here, if you do well, if you do the right thing, will you not be accepted? So in a sense saying, listen, what are you worried about? If you're doing the right thing, then there's no reason to be angry. So I think Cain knew that there was something going on with his heart when he gave this offering. And I think God is saying, listen, you know why your offering wasn't accepted. And you know, that's a little bit of a speculation, but I think it makes sense. And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. So negative emotions aren't necessarily a sin. But what Cain's going to do later on is definitely a sin. And it's rooted in bitterness. And so this bitterness is caused by a heart problem. And instead of ruling over that, Cain is going to allow his fallen nature to get the best of him. And we see that happen later on in this chapter. Cain spoke to Abel his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is Abel your brother? He said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? And the Lord said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. Now, just to clarify something, God isn't asking him because God doesn't already know. God is trying to get Cain to confess, and he's interacting with Cain. God already knows what happened, but he's trying to interact with Cain in a way that will get him to admit what he did, and instead, Cain lies to God pretty much, and says he doesn't know. And, you know, am I my brother's keeper? Which he is his brother's keeper. He's the older brother. He was supposed to be his younger brother's protector. Instead, he kills him. Now, God says that he's cursed from the ground. And in verse 12, when you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. What's interesting here is where it says, when you work the ground, it will no longer yield you its strength. And so what's interesting to me here is that the ground yielding its strength to you means when you plant something, it will grow. And it's such a beautiful idea to think that God himself is causing the ground to yield its strength to you when you plant seeds. Which really got me into gardening, actually, and the idea of planting seeds, because it's this beautiful depiction of God's grace allowing something to grow that you've planted. Cain said to the Lord, and by the way, not clarify, but just to touch on something. This is also related to sowing the word, right? That God gives the strength. The scripture says we may plant and water, but God gives the increase. Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today away from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." And so what's interesting here is this is worldly sorrow. Cain is not sorrowful because his brother's dead. Cain is sorrowful because he doesn't want to take the punishment. He doesn't want to be killed. So this is a rather evil response from Cain, but expected from someone who just killed their brother. But here's the way God responds. Then the Lord said to him, "Not so. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold." And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest any who found him should attack him. This is a showcase of God's mercy and love for Cain, even though he's a transgressor. I mean, this little, young man just killed his brother and doesn't seem to really be sorrowful at all, but God still loves him and has mercy on him. Then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. When he built a city, he called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. So he built a city and had a son. These are all mercies from God. God enabled his wife to conceive and give him a son. God enabled him to do the building that he did. So Cain is still being blessed by God. God is still being good to him despite his own actions. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad fathered Mehujael, and Mehujael fathered Methusael, and Methusael fathered Lamech. And Lamech took two wives. The name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other Zillah. Now, this is not God is not supporting polygamy here. Some people will say, well, look, even in the Old Testament, God, allowed people to have multiple wives. God allows people to make choices. Yes, he does. Now, do those choices always lead to positive outcomes? No, they don't. So when you see something happen in the Bible, it doesn't necessarily mean God wanted that to happen. God is not puppeteering his creation. He is allowing people to make free will choices. And that's what you're seeing here. God is just giving you an account of what happened. So let's remember, this doesn't mean that God wanted Lamech to have two wives, that was his desire. Ada bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all those who play the lyre and the pipe. Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. The sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. You actually see this later on in the New Testament when Peter asks Jesus, how many times should I forgive someone who sins against me? And he says up to 7 times, and Jesus says up to 70 times 7. And this is this same phrase being used here. Now, in the sense that this is used in Genesis, it's about vengeance for sin, and in the New Testament, it's about forgiveness. So it's a very interesting contrast there between the forgiveness of, and the 70 times 7 in the New Testament is representative of God's forgiveness. So, you always forgive is the sense given in the New Testament. And again, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Seth. For she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. To Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. And so, obviously, at this point in time, people begin to pray to the Lord and call upon his name. And the very next verse obviously is the 5th chapter, and I'm not going to go into that. But it does get pretty interesting from here on out. Not that it hasn't been interesting already, but so chapter 4 is sort of the beginning of the generations of the fallen creation. It is right after the fall. The first thing we see happen is there's a murder. And this is the story of mankind up until now. And going forward until the Lord returns, this is God is allowing in his mercy for humans to make decisions. They're not always the best decisions. Oftentimes they're not the best decisions. And God in his mercy is using those things to work his purposes into his creation. The crucifixion is a perfect example of that, right? That God did not force the Jews or the Romans to do what they did, but he used their rebellion to set up a situation where the atonement for sin of the whole world could be accomplished. So we see that God is using this fallen world to show how good he still is. So hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions, you can email me at Jacob, Jacob, at Velchin, VELCHIN.com, and be sure to visit the website. It's www.velchin.com. God bless you. Have a great day.